Welcome to Behind the Book. It's time now for Behind the Book, hosted by Tess Thompson and Karen McQuestion, two authors with a passion for books, no filters, and limitless curiosity. Join them now to find out the real story behind your favorite books and authors. And now, Behind the Book.
Welcome to another edition of Behind the Book. I'm here with my co-host, Karen McQuestion. We have had an exciting couple weeks, especially Karen, whose book, The Moonlight Child, is number 2 in the Kindle store as we speak. How does that feel?
Unbelievable. I just woke up and I saw it and I thought, quick, take a screenshot because this may never come my way again. But I'm glad you said The Moonlight Child because I've been hearing The Midnight Child, the Moon Child. So it's always important. Get that title correct.
Well, it almost came out of my mouth as moonlit. And I'm like, no, it's not a moonlit child. Although I suppose she was lit by the moon, but I won't say anything because I don't want to give away the plot. But
no, it's always exciting to see a book do well and be well reviewed. And why does one book do better than others? I don't honestly know. Unless you're Stephen King or Nora Roberts or, there are a few out there that are consistently doing well. But the rest of us, you just put out the best book you know how to do and you hope readers find it. And yeah. I'm sorry, I'm so distracted by your hat. I have to tell the listeners that Tess is wearing a baseball cap and it says
Queen Bee.
Queen Bee.
And it was a gift from my daughter, Emerson. She spent a week on the Oregon coast with her best friend. And I had been reading this book called Money Bitch or something. I'll put it in the show notes so if anybody's interested in reading it. But anyway, she's basically talks about how you can manifest your dreams and desires and, just ways of, it's basically you are your thoughts. So the more positive you are, the more great things come to you and everything. Anyway, she calls her followers bees for bitches. So I've been talking about this book for a couple months around the house and telling the girls, I don't have any more money blocks now and money's going to come to me and all this, it's like kind of our family joke now. Anyway, so she saw this hat and got it for me and I've been wearing it ever since.
That is adorable. That reminds me of a book. I think his name is Claude Bristol. It's called, now I'm going to get it messed up. It's The Miracle of Believing or The Miracle of Belief. And he was talking about, and he's deceased. It's a very old book. It's a precursor to The Secret. Mm-hmm. And he said, everything you see was once somebody's idea. I mean, every movie you see, every book, it was just a thought in somebody's head. The furniture in my living room, someone conceived of it. And that with that in mind, you can create things from your thoughts. It's a little woo-woo, but I like it. I like the idea that we have some control over life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And this book is kind of woo-woo as well, but I kind of I'm attracted to that kind of thing anyway. But this one really it was very interesting because she talks a lot about, she calls them money blocks, and it's ways we think about money, like what ways in which a negative outcome happens, even though you think you want something. And I was thinking about it a lot because I just got back from Oregon on this trip. And I always find myself, because it's a very rural area and, there's not a lot of, like in Seattle, everybody has a fancy car and that sort of thing. And I always feel kind of embarrassed. Like I don't want to seem uppity or like I'm all that, like I think I'm all that. And I've discovered that that's kind of what she would call a money block. Like I'm basically diminishing myself because I don't want to make other people feel bad. So it was just interesting to have just read this book and then go down there. But anyway.
Well, I know too, they always say when you talk to toddlers, you don't say, don't touch the cupcakes, because what they hear is touch the cupcakes. So what you have to say is, come over here and let me show you something I'm doing. It's so I kind of almost wonder if subconsciously we're focusing on the negative when we talk about it. Like, I hope my book doesn't tank, or I hope, this person will agree to come on our podcast. Instead, we have to have a more positive outlook. Doesn't hurt, might help.
Right. Well, exactly. Yeah. And for you to have a book top 2 in the entire Kindle store. I mean, think about that with all the millions of books. Would you have ever believed that could be possible? Like, let's just say 10 years ago when you first started.
Oh gosh, no. And the woman our good friend who we interviewed today, Denise Grover Swank, something she was talking about really resonated with me. She said, I just wanted people to read my books. And that's what I wanted. I would think if 10 people did, then I'd be like, well, now maybe 100 people could read it. At one point, it was a couple thousand. And I thought that would be like a stadium filled with people reading my books. I was just so in awe. So for me to say out of, what are there like, how many millions of books are there? 4 million, 5 million, more than that.
It might be 6, actually. Yeah.
But so for me to say at this moment in time, mine is number 2 in the Kindle format, it's just surreal.
Yeah. Well, it's very well deserved, as you know. I am your greatest fan, so I'm a little biased, but I was looking at something else and I saw it today and I was just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it's number 2. That is just so awesome. So
thank
I'm happy
you
for you and proud of you. And I was like, God, I hope she doesn't. I was like, I hope she doesn't dump me now. She's like all fancy.
Next week I won't be fancy anymore. You just have to have the same friends all the way through.
That's right. Yeah. Well, yeah. I always think that they always say, oh, you know who your friends are when you're down. I think it's you know who your friends are when you're up, because they'll dump you when you're not up. It all works itself out. But anyway, well, we probably should let the listeners listen to the lovely Denise Grover Swank. She gave a great interview. She's so much fun. I would love to hang out with her just on a regular basis, but
I agree.
She lives too far away.
Well, enjoy.
Yeah, on with the show. Today we have Denise Grover Swank visiting with us. We're super excited. We both are personal friends with her, but also big fans. She's a New York Times and USA Today bestselling author, born in Kansas City, Missouri. And she lived there until she was 19. Then she became nomadic, living in 5 cities, 4 states, and 10 houses over the course of 10 years before she moved back to her roots. She speaks English and a smattering of Spanish and Chinese, which she learned through an intensive Nick Jr. immersion period, which we want to hear more about that. Her hobbies include witty Facebook comments, which I can attest to is true, and dancing in her kitchen with her children. Quite badly, if you believe her offspring, which of course we don't. And hidden talents include the gift of justification and the ability to drink massive amounts of caffeine and still fall asleep within 2 minutes. That's a superpower and a gift. She has 6 children and hasn't lost her sanity, or so she leads you to believe. Welcome, Denise. We're so glad to see you.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So we always are curious about our guest writing journey and publishing journey. So tell us how you became a novelist and which of your titles was your first published book?
Okay, well, I was an avid reader as a child, like read all the time. And so it just kind of was natural for me to start coming up with my own stories. And so I started my first book in 4th grade and I wrote 70 pages on a spiral notebook before I stopped, which became the first of many books I didn't finish. So then, I tried to write books off and on, but I'm dating myself here, but we didn't have computers. We only had typewriters or handwritten stuff. I did have like one of those early like typewriters where you could back up, like it saved it and then it would print the page. So I had one of those at one point before I got a computer. But I just always like stalled because I was missing this really important thing called a plot. I don't know. Like I started off writing historical romance because I lived in Joplin, Missouri for like 13 years. And so I was like researching the town, and I love research, man. I love research, and found out it was a mining town. And so like throwing in fashion and all this other stuff. And I'm like, I'm about 50 pages in. And I'm like, where the hell is this book going? Right? I don't even know. So instead of fixing it like a real author would, I just stopped. Anyway, that was kind of the trend for a while. And then in the 90s, I found out about blogging. So I started a blog about my family and adoption. I have 3 children adopted from Asia. And so there were a lot of adoption blogs. So I kind of like got back into the habit of writing and kind of learned the art of storytelling through my blog, because every entry was a story, what had happened with my kids. So I had to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. I learned how to cut my darlings. I'd have a really funny line, but it broke it up. And I was like, I got to cut it. Yeah. So that was a really good, way to get me back into writing. And then in 2009, but it's weird because I always knew I was going to write a book one day. I always knew I was going to be published. Talk about arrogant. I always knew that was my path. Back in 2009, though, I'm like, girl, you're not getting any younger and you haven't wrote a book, and, you need to get on this. So I heard about NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month. So I decided I was going to do it. And so I told myself I was either going to do it, and I don't know how you feel about cursing, but I'll bleep it. I was either going to do it or it's either do it or, get off the pot, right? Okay, we'll just do it that way. And so I did. I plotted out a book. I wrote a romantic suspense. I finished it in December 10th because it's November, and I carried on through. I wrote 60,000 words in November, then had finished it by December 10th. And then I let it set for a couple of weeks because people are always like, oh, let it set for a couple of weeks. And then you go back and revise it. And I went back to revise it. And it was so bad, y'all. It was so, so, so bad. In the meantime, I'd started writing another book, which was totally out of my wheelhouse. It was a paranormal thriller. And every chapter I wrote, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. Just write. I had a friend who was encouraging me, well, just write one more. Just write one more chapter. I'm loving it so far. So, and then I finished that. So then it was time to go back and revise the first book. I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. This is so bad. I'm just going to keep going with this one. So the second book was the book Chosen, which I did eventually publish. And then once I started, man, I couldn't stop writing. I just kept writing and writing. So the next book was, so I was trying to get an agent at that time, and I couldn't get one. Paranormal was just not doing well, even though Twilight was, but they'd stopped buying paranormal. So I was like, okay, my dream agent turned me down, even tweeted about it, said read a manuscript. I can't remember what it was exactly. Read a manuscript I love, but couldn't sell or couldn't buy, or #agent regret. So okay, well, I need to go somewhere else. She can't sell it. No one can. So then I started 28.5 Wishes, which was my romance mystery. And that is the first book that I published a year later, because no one wanted that book. No one, no agents. I got very few requests. But my readers that I got to read it, at that point, I just wanted people to read my books. I think I probably had 100 people read Chosen before it was ever published. Just, here, you want to read my book, right? And the same thing I had a bunch of beta readers with 28.5 Wishes, and they said that was their favorite because I wrote another book after that, YA sci-fi, because man, I don't know how to stay in my lane with genres. So so I published 28.5 Wishes because no one was interested in it. I had agents interested in the others. And then once I published that first book, indie published, I was like, man, I'm not waiting for people to tell me what I can do with my career. I realized that I can set my own destiny in my own career. So I pulled all my queries from all the agents and said, nope, doing it myself. So that's how I got started. That you were probably wanting a 3-sentence answer, and I gave you an essay.
No, we love the long answers here.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
You can't go wrong with us. No, okay. Absolutely not. Okay. So was that 28.5 Wishes? Was that the beginning of your?
Yes, that was the first book I published 10 years ago this month, actually. Yeah.
And did you intend it to be a series?
No. Well, that's interesting. No, I did not. I just wrote it. And then I was a member of an RWA chapter, and they brought an agent in, and she took query pitches. So I told her about it. And she goes, I was writing it still. She goes, oh, that sounds really good, because True Blood was really big back then. It kind of had that kind of vibe, small town, kind of quirky characters. So she said, when you're done, send it to me. But also in the meantime, you need to come up with plots for 3 more books. And I'm like, what? So I did. So that was really nice, though, because when no agents wanted it, at least I still had really short plots for 3 more books after that.
Is that the book you recommend that people read if they're not familiar with your work? Is that a good jumping off point?
Yeah, if they like romance mystery, like humorous, that's definitely the book to start with. It's weird because like I said, I can't stay in my lane, so I have a more serious mystery, I have rom-com, I have new adult. Like that's I'm trying to rein myself in now. And I have paranormal romance.
Well, your Rose Gardner mystery series is one of your most popular. Is that right?
That's
What,
definitely true. Yeah.
yeah, what do you think makes those books so popular? What's the special ingredient?
Well, I'm gonna be real honest. I think part of it was timing with publishing. It did okay for the first couple years, but I was releasing them a year apart, like traditional, places do. But I found readers kind of forgot about it in the meantime. So after the third book came out, and it didn't really do as well as I'd hoped, but the reviews were really good. All the reviews were really good. So I realized it was a discoverability issue. So that was back in 2013, the fall of 2013, and permafree was working really well. So I made it permafree. And then I did a bunch of other things, like I did a newsletter incentive. I wrote a novella and split it into 3 parts and sent it out in my newsletter. And they can only read it if they subscribe to my newsletter, and some other things. But the free is what really catapulted it because it did well. And then, like, especially on Apple, it stayed up in the top 10 for a long time. Number one a lot, on the free category. And so just the amount of volume of people reading the free book just like drove sales. So, and there was more follow through back then of people picking up a free book and reading it and then moving on to the next books of the series. So I think a lot of it was timing, because that series did well for a really long time.
Now I know you have published with a traditional publisher a
Yes.
few times, and you also have books translated into multiple languages and produced in audio. But it seems that from what I'm hearing, that you have a fondness for self-publishing.
Turns out I'm a control freak. I didn't know. I truly did not know how much of a control freak I was. Yeah. So yeah, I think I've published every which way you can. I've done it with a small publisher. I've done it with a larger publisher. I've done it with Amazon imprints, 2 of them. I've done a print only deal. And I always fall back to, I much rather do it myself. I'm not saying I won't publish with a publisher again, because we have to go into it with the expectations of what you want out of it. And so most of the time I did it with business reasons, especially when I published with Grand Central. I knew they could get me into bookstores and I couldn't do that myself. So that was the sole reason that I did it with that. But yeah, there's usually, and then like I did a YA romance with Blank, which is HarperCollins, but it's also like under Zondervan, but it wasn't Christian. It was called Clean YA. And I got hardly any money for that. And most, like, my friends were just like, thought I was stupid. But the only reason I wrote that book was for my daughters. They loved YA romance and they wanted to see my book in a bookstore. So I did it for them. So that was the point. And is weirdly enough, then BookBub did a deal on it and it hit the New York Times list. So
Oh, you can't argue with that.
I can't argue with that.
No.
So I know. So like, yeah, every time I accept a deal with a publisher, it's usually with some goal in mind. And I realize that I'm probably trading things like control, and I'm trading oftentimes money. I can usually make way more money if I publish it myself, but there's some goal that I have in mind when I go with a publisher.
I'm starting to feel like publishing on your own is starting your own company and being your own entrepreneur. And
yes,
going with a publisher
so.
is like being more of an employee. I mean, they look out for you and they provide things, but then there is also that, like, as you said, the control, when their team, I heard them say, no, marketing thinks it would be better if we did such and such.
Yeah.
And, and then they override the author, and they may well be right, but it's infuriating if you're used to being able to make all the decisions.
Yeah, or get stuck with a bad cover.
Yeah.
Usually you can like, if it's just you can have say. But, and I will say that made all the difference for me. So like like I told you, I think 100 people had read Chosen before I published it. It was the second book I published, because I did so well with 28 and a Half Wishes, which to me, my definition of success back then was to sell 1,000 copies of that book before. So I published it July 1st, and my idea of success was to sell 1,000 copies by December 31st. And I hit that in September. And I was like, holy cow, I'm on my way. So then I published Chosen, which was paranormal thriller, romance, and it didn't do so well. So that was my first lesson in readers don't cross genres. To build a whole new like reader base for that. But it was easier back in 2011 because we were competing against traditional books that were, $9.99, $12.99. And I'd done a lot of research, and I was following the marketing advice of Amanda Hawking and John Locke, who believed in putting their first books 99 cents and then the next book's $2.99. But by the end of the year, I realized, and I say this like makes me sound really stupid, and I think I was, but I was like, because Chosen really took off. It was in the top 100 by the end of December, and I was selling thousands of copies, in the month of December, and I was like, holy cow, I could actually make money doing this. So, because I just wanted people to read my books, right? So I came up with a business plan. So at the end of December, 1st of January, I came up with a business plan, and I really attribute that to the success I had, because then everything after that was a business decision. So even though, as the authors, we're like writing the books of our hearts, then once it was done, I realized that I had to then switch to business mode and then focus on business. And since then, I've made some really hard business decisions on series that I love that just won't sell. And it's a matter of like, if I really, really love something, I will write it and publish it, whether it loses money or not. But I also have to keep in mind that I have kids in college. I have a kid in private high school. I'm a single mom. So I also have to keep that bottom line in mind sometimes. And it's hard to make those decisions. So I can relate now more to traditional publishers, the decisions that they make. But at the same time, I still have an emotional investment in my own books that sometimes, a traditional publisher would just say, cut it. Like they probably would have cut Rose Gardner off after book 3. I only sold 2,000 copies that month, which was down from the previous months. But then but all the marketing ideas I came up with and implemented, that was in September. The next January, when I released the 4th book, I sold 5,000 that month. And then the next month, I hit the USA Today list, or the next book, I hit the USA Today list. And the next book, I hit the New York Times list. So, I just kept building. And so like, if I had been a traditional publisher, I definitely they would have cut me off. They would have cut that series off at book 3 and said, well, scrap that, didn't work. But because I was so invested in it and I really believed in it, and not just because I was just deluded. I saw the reviews. I saw reader reactions. I'm like, I just needs to be found by other people. So I told you, I give long answers. Sorry.
No, this is a long format, so we love it.
Okay.
I am interested in this though, because I was just having this conversation earlier with some author friends, and have you noticed that some of your passion projects that perhaps you just wrote for yourself or for your daughter, for example, that those have done way better than you thought they would? And if that's the case, then how important is it to stay in your lane, or to, really stick with a brand, or, that sort of thing?
Yes and no. Like I've written some things that I really love that didn't do well. Case in point, my Piper Lancaster series, which is paranormal, is urban fantasy, paranormal romance, kind of a mix. Some of my readers showed up for that. Many of them did not. And I just couldn't find new readers. And I truly believe that people associate me with romance and mystery. And so it's hard for them to cross over to that. And so like there was supposed to be a 4th book in that series, and I haven't written it because I just can't justify taking the time. It's a really complicated series, so I can't justify taking the time to write it, because the 3rd book it didn't even break even the week of release. And that never happens for me. Yeah, because I spend a lot on editing and covers. And, I go through 3 rounds of editing, and I pay a lot for my covers. But usually I do break even, and I didn't on that. That was one of those rare things. But yeah, but like my YA romance, it did way better than I expected, considering, it was kind of a one-off, and Blink didn't hardly put any effort into marketing. I don't think they did any, other than they invited me to ALA in Orlando to talk to librarians. But pretty much that was it. I hired my own publicist for that because they didn't have a publicist. But with the Rose Gardner series, so I just ended that back in February. And I got to a point where every time I'd start a book, I was like terrified that I was going to screw it up, that I was I was going too far off the path. Because Rose, I always said, as long as Rose was growing, I was going to keep writing the series. So in the end, though, I would get to a point in the book and I would just say, you know what, just write it. Just write the book you want to write. Who cares? Don't think about the readers, because they've come along with you this far and that's what you've done. So just write the book you want to write. And if they fall away, that's okay, because you stayed true to what you wanted.
Now, this is an opportunity for me to just fangirl a little bit and tell you that I've been watching your career along with what I was doing. I was watching what you were doing. But the first time I ever met you was at that writer's retreat.
Yes, I love that retreat.
Oh, that was so much fun. And
yes.
the funny thing is, we should tell our listeners that all the other authors, they're staying in a beach house and it was just lovely. We're like planning on retreating. And if I remember correctly, Denise, you were like, well, what time do we have slotted in for getting work done? And everyone's like, well, we're going to be on a retreat. We weren't thinking about work. And you were like, then I can't come because am I remembering this correctly?
Yes.
So then it was like we reshuffled because we didn't want you to not come.
I'm sorry.
And no, it was great. But
now I have the name Fun Killer. Right?
No. When you closed your laptop, you became extra fun. So
there you go. Okay.
But I loved that you had that dedication, that drive. I thought it kind of coincided with what I thought of you already, that you were just sort of a force. And
kind of driven, yeah.
And at that point, too, you had mentioned that you were starting to co-write books with other authors. And so I wanted to ask you about that, how that came about and how you actually do it. I jokingly told Tess I would ask for a friend because we've been considering writing a book together. And I was like, we have to figure out how people do that.
Okay, but wait, before Denise answers this question, which I am dying to hear, I have to tell a little anecdote about that weekend. So Karen has shared on the podcast how I was writing in the airport.
In the airport, yeah.
And she and her husband walked by me and I was writing in the airport. Well, I was writing in the airport because Denise was writing on the porch that one of the mornings we were there. And I looked out there and I said, oh, good morning. And it was like 9:00 or something. And she's like, oh, good morning. And I said, how's it going? She's like, oh, I just got about 3,000 words this morning, just sitting here. I was like, okay. So the mindset here is you can write anywhere. Like you said that several times to me over the weekend. And that really had a huge influence on me. And I was like, okay, I got to step up my game. So it kind of all like,
oh, good.
It's a triangle here because Karen said she thought she should. Yeah, that she should step up her game. So anyway, that I just had to share that. But anyway, go ahead and answer our question.
Okay. Oh, it was about co-writing, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. I think the first co-written book I did was with Shannon Mayer. And we mostly did it because, a couple of reasons. She knew I was wanting to go back into paranormal. So we thought that would be a good way for me to jump back in. Because it's crazy because I was known for paranormal, my Chosen series was like my big seller. That's why I sold a series to 47 North, is because of the Chosen series. But then I didn't write in it and I fell out. So I co-wrote with her. And so how we did it is we had 2 characters and every other chapter was a character. So I had a character, she had a character. But weirdly enough, we didn't plot it out a whole lot. We had some points we knew we had to hit and we just wrote. And so especially with the second book, because it was supposed to be a 3-book series, another case in point of not doing really well. A Kiss of Death, paranormal. The second book, we would end our chapters in the craziest places. She left my character on top of a moving train with bad guys chasing me. And she was good luck, haha. So it became kind of like a game of who could like put their character in the worst situation and get out of this one. Um, but then I've also done it where I've done more of I wrote the outline, person wrote the first draft, and then I revised it and like heavily revised it and made changes and stuff. I don't like doing it that way. Again, control freak. So like, I changed a lot. But right now I am co-writing with Angela Casella, AR Casella, and she is we're writing rom-coms. And the part of the reason I asked her to help me, I asked her if she wanted to do this. She's actually my developmental editor, and so she's like, I noticed like I had one book that I was it was one of the co-written books, that I was revising. She goes, I think you need to do this, but if you want me to like fill that in for you, like do this description or whatever, I can do that, because she knows I was short on time. And I was like, so I emailed her back and I said, I kind of like, I think, I could tell that you would like to write. I said, would you like to co-write some books with me? So we actually wrote a mystery first, which we haven't published. Ended up having a little bit of sci-fi elements. I'm like, I don't know how we're going to like market this. So it's kind of like on hold. But we have a rom-com series, and we write every other character, or we have two characters, boy, male and female, and usually we trade which one. And so it works out so that every other chapter is our character. And we're having a lot of fun with that. And we're doing so well that we actually just started an LLC for our books, so that it'll be easier for keeping track of money and paying, because that's important. You got to pay your co-authors. Like, how are you going to do that? You're going to share the royalties or whatever. So yeah, I enjoy it. It's a change. It's different than my books, because sometimes when you're writing your own book, you're carrying the whole load yourself. When you're co-authoring, especially with someone you trust, and you feel like you've got that connection with, it's fun, because you're then throwing ideas. And at first I thought, it feels kind of like, I don't know, I was kind of weird about it at first, but then I realized, like, when you like TV shows and movies, that's usually not just one writer. There's usually like multiple writers throwing ideas in. And I thought, well, this might be interesting to have like two different writers like creating a story, and seeing what you can come up with. So, but there is also compromise. Sometimes you want to go one way, they might want to go another. So you got to figure out, well, how badly do I want this? How badly do they want this? What's best for the story? Where when I'm writing it myself, I just write whatever I want. So did I help you with that?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, you really did. I
Okay.
thank you. We filed those points away, right, Tess?
Yes.
So the next thing people usually ask me is, how do you like compile them? So what we usually do in every instance I've done is a Google document. And so like I usually write my chapters in Scrivener, and then I paste them in the Google document. And then I usually copy her chapters and then put it from the Google document and put it in Scrivener. So, but Google gets a little weird once you put so many comments or like changes in there and editing. And then we usually by the end of the first draft, we have to copy the document and make a new one, because it like saves all those old things in there, and it just gets too full because it's a book. And our books are long. Angela and I tend to write 100,000 to 110,000 workbooks. So
those are long.
Yeah. So like Google can't handle it very well. So I suggest saving, but we've never lost anything. But we had one that kind of locked up a little bit. So it kind of freaked us out, and it straightened out. But I usually like every few chapters, I'll download the file so that we've got it. And I think she does the same thing. So
do you write your part and then you let her know, like, or are you on a schedule?
No, with Angela and I, we're not on a schedule, because she's still editing and I'm still writing my own books. And God bless her, she's new enough to this. She loves it. She gets her chapter done. Like, I'll post my chapter in the morning, and she'll like have her chapter up by late afternoon or evening. I'm like, oh my God, I gotta write my chapter already. I thought I bought myself a day, right? I was writing my own book. But like when I get to the end of I tend to write like most of my books at the end of the book. And so like I'm cramming a lot of words in the last couple of weeks of writing. So I hope to like usually finish one of our books and then get to the cram section for me. But there's been a time where we hadn't finished our book and I took 2 weeks off to just like get my book done and then I could focus on ours. So yeah.
Seems like you just figure out a way to make it work.
Yeah, we do. And we're like finding a rhythm for ourselves. So like, I know some people schedule it. They schedule like, okay, well, this is when I have the break in my schedule. And then and I co-wrote with Christy Gale and we kind of did it that way. Like we wanted to get this book out fast. And we both kind of had a break in our schedules. So we were literally writing a chapter a day. So I would write my chapters in the morning and post it. She would write her chapter in the evening and post it. And so we pretty much tried to keep to that. Every morning I'm writing a chapter but Christine can't write on the fly like that. So she made up, well, together we made up a chapter by chapter of what's going to happen in our books. But I'm the worst at changing things. So I'd be like, Chris, sorry. I like my character do this instead. So she said she claims she liked it. She claimed that it kept her on her toes. She's probably cursing me, but but she usually would tell me, oh, no, that's better. Because usually I come up with my best ideas while I'm writing. Like I can try to plot a book, but the best ideas come right in the middle of, oh, I should do this, because then it's the things I've already written that like spur those ideas. So I have a book that I want to sell to a publisher, a domestic thriller, but I told my agent, I said, I don't want to sell it on a synopsis because it won't work. Like I've tried to do that. I've tried to sell books off of synopsis, like a detailed synopsis. And it doesn't work because like I need the freedom to like change things while I'm writing. So I said, I want to write the book and finish it, and then you can try to sell it. But I'm only one chapter in, so it'll be a while.
You're not there yet.
Sorry, Eddie. Yeah.
So how does that work with your agent? He is fine with you self-publishing, and then when you have something for him, you send it over?
Yeah, he very much knows an indie publisher when I started talking to him, and he would really like for me to send him a book to sell. Right now, pretty much all they're doing for me is translations in some audiobooks. He hasn't sold an actual book for me yet. So, and that's my fault because I keep saying I'm going to send him one and I haven't. And he hasn't fired me yet. So I think he's still hopeful.
He's like, I'm getting one any day.
Yeah.
keep looking at your inbox. It's going to be
That's
here.
right. Someday.
All right. So another thing we're curious about, because we've been studying you, of course.
Yes, we have.
And you seem to really keep up with publishing trends.
Oh, yes.
You change covers and, you're always seeming to change things up. How do you keep your finger on the pulse of what readers are looking for? And how important do you think it is for authors to stay relevant on trends?
Well, I don't think that we should all be chasing trends, because then we'll just be chasing our tails. They just change too quickly. But like with an old series or something, it's a good idea if you want to try to market it or keep it fresh, to like look and see what that genre, what the covers are looking at. And maybe like I changed my Rose Gardner covers. And that did like pick up, that refreshed it and stuff. But I'm actually considering changing them again and going with a different, because I was like going towards the more cozy aspect, even though it's not a cozy. But now I'm thinking of going more of a romantic comedy kind of cover. That's not like it's the illustrated covers. But I just got to find someone who's not intimidated to do 9 covers, because there's 9 covers in that first series. But I think I pay attention. I'm in a lot of author groups. Like I'm probably in like 6 big author groups. And I don't talk much, but I'm stalking and seeing what people are saying and what they're doing and what they're saying about, BookBub, how it's just not very effective anymore. And that's good to know, because, if I have some BookBubs that don't do well and I'm like, oh, it's just me, and no, it's the trend. And so I can like see, things that I'm noticing with my books, people are noticing too. And then just like TikTok, I'm paying a lot of time. I'm in a group of authors that are using TikTok. I haven't really done much with that. My biggest TikTok, granted, I only have like 6. But my biggest TikTok is of the beach, like not me like talking about books or anything, but the waves at the beach. But like I'm paying attention, like, and I'm noticing some people can really do well. Like some people have something that goes viral and they can get their book into the top 20 on Amazon. And amazingly, there's rarely a link. These readers are going and finding that book on Amazon. And we, as authors, we're trying, you got to have your links, you got to have your links, you got to have your links. And these people are going and finding them. But I think that's also like shooting for the stars from what I've like studied. I mean, still do it if you want, but you can't, there's no recipe to going viral. And so if you like doing it, keep doing it. Maybe you will, but don't count on it. So I've like put that on the back burner just from studying and paying attention.
I found that too. You can't make anything happen. You can
Yeah.
try to set it up and hope. And, you try a lot of different, it's usually kind of a multi-pronged approach that
Yeah.
leads readers to books. And it's synchronicity and the stars aligning and everything else. And
Yeah, I think there's a lot of luck sometimes involved too. Yeah, the synchronicity of everything lining up. I mean, if I released 20 and a Half Wishes in 2021, would it do as well as it, would that series do as well? I don't think so. Because I think there are a lot of factors that played into it that, like I said, Permafree was really wildly successful when it was first. So I put my books through Smashmouth or Smashwords onto iTunes, and I didn't pay any attention to the sales on that site after I did that in 2013. And I got an email from iTunes from Apple in December saying, your third book is like one of our top thriller books of the year. And I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, like you're selling so well here. We're giving you a rep. And I'm like, what? Even been paying attention because I was used to like getting no sales on Apple, like hardly any. But I'd pulled everything out of Select and went wide at the same time I did all of that. And so that was another lesson to pay attention.
now, I almost feel like right now we should explain to listeners, Smashwords is a distributor. So when you're publishing your own books, you can put them into Smashwords and they will distribute them to all the different sales channels, one of which is iBooks, which is with Apple. So, and when you talked about taking it out of Select, that's an option you can do with Amazon where you agree only to sell through Amazon, and which there are some advantages to that, but then your book isn't available in these other markets.
Yeah, Select became a thing back in December of 2011 because Chosen was doing really well. And then they introduced Select, and I didn't put those books in Select. And then the ranks started falling. And I'm like, holy cow, what happened? Then I put them back in, I put them in Select because I realized I'd sold like 5,000 copies of Chosen on Amazon and I'd sold 60 on Barnes and Noble. Like, okay, no brainer, I can do this. But then I also realized but then it stopped working as well. It was a different program than it is now.
So are all your books wide?
So I think it depends on genre. So like paranormal, like again studying the market, like when I released Piper Lancaster a few years ago, I was watching iBooks and I was watching Barnes and Noble and I was watching even big authors and smaller authors I knew when they released, if they were releasing how high did they hit on the list? And so like I noticed most paranormal authors, urban fantasy or paranormal romance, like on Apple, which is like a third of my sales. So I noticed that they would not sell, like they would maybe hit 60 on the top 100 list, if they even hit the top 100 at all. And so I realized that there just wasn't much of an audience there for paranormal or Barnes and Noble. So then it was an easy decision to go into KU with that series. But I still have some wide readers that want to read everything I write. So sometimes like I try, it's like my rom-coms right now, I release them wide for a few days with a pre-order so that they can pre-order it or they can get it like the first 2 days that it's released. And then I pull it all and put it in KU because rom-coms, most of those sell really well in KU and most of my sales are page reads and not actual book sales. So it just depends on the genre where I'm at. My mystery is all wide because that's where my readers, I have a really strong reader base wide with Apple especially. So yeah, I think it just depends on the genre. There's not one size fits all with that.
And that's why it's so important to study the market, I think.
Yes.
And for those who are listening, KU is Kindle Unlimited, which is a subscription-based. No, that's okay. I can just imagine someone somewhere going, "What?"
What is she
Because that would
talking
be
about?
me under different circumstances.
Yeah.
But now our listeners can't see this, but I am seeing you are sitting in an absolutely gorgeous office with bookcases and French doors, and I see some small animal in the background
I
walking
hope
back
you
and forth.
can't hear him
I
because
cannot hear him.
that is my dog Duke, and he is really not happy that he's not in here with me. He's a long-haired dachshund, and he's a rescue. So like I just got him because my daughter called me from college 3 hours away with a sob story of, Mom, there's this 10-year-old dachshund whose family dropped him off and nobody's going to adopt him and he needs a home. You need to give him. So I'm like, okay. Because that's kind of like my blog I told you about. It was called There's Always Room for One More. That's kind of my philosophy. Anyway, I didn't know dachshunds were like so territorial of the person they pick. And so like when he's not with me, he is not happy. So, but if he's in here and something goes off, he's just going to bark his full head off. So I'm trying to keep it quiet. Yeah.
So is your office your primary place where you write?
No.
Tell us about that.
So yeah, no, I usually work like business stuff in here, and most readers don't realize how much business there is to writing. Like I would say I spend at least 60, sometimes 70% of my time on the business of writing. And then there's the writing part of me, and then there's the business part of me. So, so I do most of my business in here, but usually when I'm writing, I'm sitting in a comfy chair with the ottoman or even my bed. I used to write at Starbucks all the time because I could get away from the dogs. You know, they're wanting me to let them in and out and they're barking at things. And I could go to Starbucks with my headphones and write for 4 or 5 hours and get, 4,000 words in. But I haven't done that since the pandemic. So I do write everywhere. Like this morning I was writing in the car while I was waiting for my son to get out of football practice. But yeah, I don't usually sit at a desk and write. I will revise at a desk, but I can't write at a desk. But I can write at a Starbucks table. So it makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. If you learn anything about me, it's like there's no rhyme or reason to me. There just is.
Well, it's good that you know that about yourself.
Yeah, right.
So as far as writing, as far as craft goes, what is the easiest part for you and what is the hardest?
At this point, it's revision. I really like revision. I had an editor tell me that I was fantastic at revising. Like she couldn't believe how good I was because I can take and at that book, she had told me to cut off the first half of a book. Rewrite it, and I did because she was right, as hard as that was to hear. But I'm really good about repurposing things. So I can take a scene that I'm going to cut and I can chop it up and then remake it into a new scene that you never would have suspected it was the scene it was before. And I kind of like get a weird kind of like thrill out of doing stuff like that, as weird as that sounds. And I just kind of like taking something that I think is okay and then making it into something that I hope is really great. Like, at least in my head it is until, but then like, I don't know about you guys, but like, there's like an evolution of a book. You're like, oh, this is off to a great start. Then it's like, oh my God, this is the stupidest book in the entire world. What am I writing? And then it's like, oh, I'm really proud of this book. Right. So yeah. Anyway, I'm to the point where I don't like first drafting. I really don't. It's like harder and harder for me to write first drafts. And I even like took a month off last year, which is not, I don't usually do that. I took the whole month of July off from writing and didn't write anything or revise anything. And spent a lot of time working on learning ads. So, and just business stuff. And that helped because I feel like I probably just got burnt out because I just write a lot. I release a lot of books. And I just felt like my brain needed a break. So, and plus the pandemic really messed with my head too, I think. So, first draft is not one of my funnest things, I think. But in writing, description is my weakest. My best part that I can do with craft is dialogue. I like writing dialogue a lot.
We have a lot of listeners who are aspiring writers. What advice would you have for them?
Write all the time. That's the thing that NaNoWriMo taught me, was to write every day. Like I had to write, the goal was to write 50,000 words by the end of the month. And so I broke that down and realized I had to write 1,667 words a day to make that goal. And so, yeah, so that's why I started Chosen after I finished, because I had learned, I trained myself to write every day, write every day. Then I was supposed to go 2 weeks without writing. It felt weird, like there was something missing. So I started another book. And I think that's part of the reason why I was so prolific too, because I trained myself to write every day, or if I wasn't writing, revise. Now I try to take Sundays off if I can, so that because for me, since I work so much, there's a real a struggle to balance home life and career. And I feel like sometimes my career really creeps into home life. When you work at home, your work is always there. So I think that's important too, is like learn to write every day, but also as you're getting into this, try to learn how to balance your family with your career too, so that and it's hard. I'm never there. I'm always tipped one way or the other. Too much family, too much career, and I'm never like got that perfect balance. But at least I'm cognizant of it, so I'm thinking about it more than I was like in probably the first 5 years that I was writing.
Is there a writing book that you'd recommend for aspiring authors?
No, why is she laughing? Why are you laughing?
I can't wait to find out.
Not really. I read Stephen King's On Writing, and I really that. Really helped me a lot. But I read it back probably in 2009, and I haven't read it since. And so part of me would love to go back and find out why. I also read a book that Janet Ivanovich wrote about writing. I can't read books on craft because like I've been invited to do talks on craft, and I'm like, I'm not your girl because I don't know it. There's when I was in RWA, there was a workshop called scene and segue, or a scene and I don't even sequence. And I don't even know, I don't know that. I think some people are just have the innate ability to know, I can tell as I'm writing, it's been too quiet. I need to throw something in. So I will literally throw, depending on whatever it is, with urban fantasy, I'll throw in an explosion, or I'll throw in somebody's been murdered, or, and because I don't plot. So I can tell when things get quiet, and then I just throw things in. Where someone who plots, I think they need to know those things of craft, and I don't pay attention to that stuff. So I'm the worst to ask for that. Sorry.
Well, I think that's great though. It's an instinctive, intuitive process for you then.
I think so. I think when I start to get bored with a story, then I got to throw something in. And I also have readers tell me that they can't see things coming. So I think that helps too, is that I haven't plotted it out, and I'm like, something's got to happen. What can I have happen? And yeah, throw something in.
So how do you know when a book is done? When you get to the end of the manuscript, because so many of us could fiddle endlessly and revise and rewrite and rework.
It's usually just time constraints. I know that I have set it up for pre-order, and it's got to go through editors, and it's got to be done. But that being said, if I feel like it's not going to be done, I will cancel a pre-order or push it out. I won't release a book that I think is just okay. But sometimes that means I'm losing a lot of sleep trying to get that book in the place that I want it to be. But sadly, I've also realized over the last few years that sometimes my best books are the ones that I'm living for 2 weeks trying to get them done. Those typically tend to be the books that turn out to be the best, because it's all encompassing, and but it's also very stressful. It doesn't work very well with a single parent who I have a child at a high school 30 minutes away that I have to drive him to and from. And so it's hard to fit that in. I'm trying to smooth that out, but I'm also very much a procrastinator. So if you give me a long deadline, I'm still crunching those 2 weeks. That's the way my brain works. At least that's what I tell myself.
Isn't that what you once told me, Tess? That if you could write as much as you did in the last 2 weeks before a book is due, that you would write many more books per year?
Yeah, no, and I bug myself because I'm just why didn't you just do this for a month? And you would have had the whole thing done instead of the last 2 weeks. Oh my God.
Well, I used to have a spreadsheet. Back in the day, I used to have a spreadsheet, and I would say, You have to write 2,000 words today. You have to write 3,000 words today. And it worked for whatever reason. That used to work in the beginning when I first started writing. But then I also realized that sometimes, since I don't plot, sometimes I have to take a day or two to figure out where this book is going. And if it doesn't feel right, did I take a wrong turn? Well, do I need to cut off the last 10,000 words? And sometimes I need to cut off the last 10,000 words because people are like, just keep going. That doesn't work for me because then I'm going the wrong way. And then I'm going to have to cut off 40,000 words instead of 10,000 words. And then I'm in worse shape. So,
Yeah.
And I get frustrated with myself when that happens. And I wish I could write the way I used to write, but I think we evolve as writers, and we, just what worked for one book doesn't necessarily work for another. I have two really good author friends that we chat with all the time, Shannon Mayer and Christine Gale. And they're like, if you would write shorter books, you could put out more books, because my books are like 110,000 words. But that's how much it takes to tell the story.
You may not have an answer for this one, but you know how Stephen King said he always writes for his wife? Like that's the reader he has in mind when he writes. Do you have someone like that?
Me. I think I just write for me, whatever interests me or what I want to read, I think. And maybe, wow, that sounds really narcissistic. But I have to enjoy what I'm writing or I'll get bored, right? And then it will be a terrible book. And that's why I can't really plot a book out, because I get bored. I know what's going to happen. I have to have those surprises. And sometimes you'll see me on Facebook going, oh my gosh, my book just took a turn I hadn't expected. And that's because I just let the story usually come out. And so if I know everything that's going to happen, I am so bored. And then it's like pulling teeth to get me to write the book. So yeah, I think mostly I write for me. And if I put reader expectations on it, it freezes me up. It's no good for me. Like with Rose, if I worried too much about how the readers were going to react to things, it would stall me big time. I just had to let that go and then just write what I wanted to write.
And now with 6 kids, I have to ask you, do they read your books?
No. No. No, for the most part, they don't. My 2 daughters read my YA romance. And my oldest daughter has read maybe 2 or 3 of the Rose Gardner series. I made her read one of my romances because she was my assistant for a few summers. And I made her read one of my rom-coms to pull quotes for graphics and stuff. But she didn't voluntarily read it. They don't read my books. I'm like, y'all, I just can't believe it. I asked my son, he's 15. I asked him the other day, I said, do you know what I write? He goes, you write fiction. I'm like, no, he goes, I think there's some romance. Yeah, okay. He said, don't people ask you? He goes, yeah, I just tell them I don't know.
Oh.
Well, it pays the bills, so you might pay a little bit of attention.
Oh, man.
All right. What is something negative that somebody said to you in the early part of your career that you used for incentive?
That's probably okay. So back when I wrote Chosen, I hadn't been published yet. And it was this paranormal thriller, totally out of my comfort zone. The main character was an ex-Marine who'd been in Iraq and had PTSD. And yeah, I know, I always get those wrong. I always get the T and the S mixed up. Anyway, and so my aunt, I told you, I was having everybody read this book, right? So my aunt reads this book and she's like, she's like, I think you should just stick to children's books. Mind you, I'd never written a children's book. But I was like, okay, thanks, Aunt Shirley. But I was like, okay, I'm not writing children's books. I'm gonna do this. So yeah, I was determined I was gonna publish that book after that, one way or the other.
And if you had listened to her, a whole career wouldn't have happened.
I know, right? Exactly.
So what are you?
I had an answer for that because I could have really been stumped.
What do you hope that readers get from reading your books? Do you have an objective?
No, but I seem to have themes that are kind of unintentional, but this kind of like happen. I usually have very strong secondary characters because I feel like main characters on their own are boring. Like we need to have people around us encouraging us and supporting us. And I always try my best. People might disagree, but I always try my best to make sure those secondary characters are very three-dimensional, flaws and all. But I also seem to have a theme of family and belonging, and like everybody like finds a place where they fit. And like with Rose, it was really strong and unconditional love. Like Rose was a firm believer in lifting people up and making them feel like they belonged somewhere. And she gave a lot of unconditional love. So I feel like, and then also like I really try to have very strong female characters. So I think those things always come through without me intending them to. And I think that's what readers have learned to expect from me.
All right, before we get to our fun little bonus questions, one more, and that is, what are you working on right now?
I'm working on the 6th Carly Moore book right now, Shades of Truth. And so it's a lot of fun because this character is on the run. She's hiding from her father who's trying to have her murdered because she knows too much about things. And she's also stumbled upon a mystery in this small town. And so she ended up living, her car broke down. She ended up living with this older man who's very cantankerous. He's in his 60s. She originally agreed to move in with him because his leg had been amputated and he needed help in exchange for rent. She took care of him. But he's become like a really popular character in this series. And so I'm really enjoying this book because he and she are now like teamed up to work on another mystery in this. And so it's really fun to see those two together because he's a hoot. So I'm having a lot of fun with this book.
Sometimes characters do that. They take on a life of their own.
Yes. Yeah. That's why I like series, because I like to see my characters evolve and I get to know them.
Well, we always end our podcast with these fun bonus questions, kind of lightning round style.
I'm really scared, y'all. I'm not going to lie.
We'll see how you do, Denise. Tell me when you're ready.
I'm ready.
What is one food that will never get past your lips?
I like just about every food, anything with texture. So probably oatmeal. I can't handle the texture of oatmeal. Yeah.
Okay. Who would you want to play you in a movie?
Oh, Julia Roberts.
I can see that.
Yeah, me
Okay.
too.
I'm good. I'm glad you said that.
What superpower would you pick given the opportunity?
I'm going to be really boring and say I could fly. I'd like to be able to pass traffic. If I could carry my son with me, take him to school and fly, miss all the traffic.
At the end of your life, what do you hope you'll have accomplished?
Oh, I hope that I've like made an impression on people. And that especially my family, like I've instilled in them a love and a sense of family, and my family's really important to me. So I hope that like they're all very close after I'm gone, and they have each other since I won't be there.
What is the worst job you've ever had?
I worked in it was a store like Target. It was called Venture, and I had to be a cashier. And oh my God, I hated that job. It was so boring. You had to stand there for 6 hours just checking things through. Oh God, I hated it. Yeah.
I like that you said I had to be a cashier. Not I worked as a cashier.
No, because I got to work in the jewelry department over Christmas, and I learned about jewelry, and I got to help people pick things out, and I was walking around and talking to them, and it was fun. And then they moved me back to cashier, and I was like, oh, I quit like 2 weeks later. Couldn't handle it.
If you could instantly become an expert in something, what would it be?
Oh gosh, I don't know. What would it be? The thing is I like learning about all kinds of things. So my interests like change like weekly. I think I would like to become an expert in biology and science. I love that. I considered going to medical school, believe it or not. So
Very cool.
Yeah.
What's your favorite scent?
I can't smell, so I have no favorite scents. So yeah,
Man,
yeah,
that's something
no.
we share. I think I smell more than you do, but I have a very poor sense of smell.
Yeah, I
So,
can't smell anything. Just rare occasions I can smell something, and it's usually tasting it. I can't describe it, tasting it in my nose, and it usually lasts for 10 seconds and then it's gone. So,
what is the most terrifying thing you've ever done?
uh, gosh. Okay, so after my husband died, my husband died back in 2006. I realized that I had not lived life and as much as I wanted to, and I realized that fear held me back. So I decided if something scared me, I would look at it, and if it couldn't hurt me. If it couldn't physically hurt me and it really couldn't like hurt me in any other way, I was going to do it. I was going to do it anyway. So like one of the stupidest, scariest things I ever did is I flew to Seattle and I made myself take the train downtown and walk to my hotel. It sounds so stupid. Like I was like, you cannot take a cab. You're going to take the train down there. And I didn't know where I was going and I thought I'm going to look stupid walking around 2 blocks with my suitcase. But I was like an overwhelm, like super anxious about this thing. And I'm like, nothing's going to happen to you. You're going to be okay. And so I did it. And then I felt so much stronger for having done it. And it's like, it wasn't even life threatening. It was so stupid. But yeah, it's probably one of the scariest things I did.
When people pronounce words incorrectly, do you let them know?
No, because sometimes I pronounce things incorrectly. But I do want people to tell me, but I don't want to embarrass them. So unless it's like really important, then usually I'll let it go.
And the last question, if you could live your life over again, would you want to?
No, I don't think so. I think I've made a lot of mistakes along the way. But I feel like every single one of those mistakes has brought me to the person that I am today. And I kind of like the person I am today. So, which I think is an accomplishment in itself because we spend most of our lives beating ourselves up. And I've kind of gotten to a place where I kind of like what I do and who I am. And so no.
What a great way to end the podcast, don't you think, Tess?
I love it.
Thanks, Denise.
I could have been like a total bummer. Like, oh my God. My life is sucks. I want to do it again.
No, actually, I thought that was a really nice, thoughtful question, answer to the question.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's how I would answer it too, actually, because it's been interesting to hear the different responses to that question. But yeah, I think like you make so many mistakes when you're young, and like I would love to return to, like what my boobs used to look like, but I'm so much better now as far as the rest of it goes.
I know, like 10 years ago, I'm like, man, I really thought that I was like overweight. And I'm like, I feel to be back there now, right?
Exactly. Anyway, well, this has been way too much fun. And I think we need to reenact our author retreat one of these days.
Yes. Oh my God. That was the best. I had so much fun that week.
Yeah.
This time I'll bring my laptop and I'll get some work done too.
All three of us can be out on the porch just typing away.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, no. You were an inspiration to all of us.
Definitely. Yeah.
All right, well,
thanks again. And we will definitely love to have you back if you have, whenever you have a release or whatever. So thanks for catching up with us.
Yeah. Thanks
Take
for
care.
having me. Right,
bye, Denise.
Thank you for listening to Behind the Book, brought to you by authors Tess Thompson and Karen McQuestion. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and post a question in the comment section. This has been Behind the Book.